First grade teacher or what?
All right. Good evening, everybody. For the record, it is Thursday, April 16th, 5:15 p.m. Time for the special meeting of the Wenatchee City Council. As always, we'll start these with a pledge to our flag. So, Councilmember Cuevas, would you lead us?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Cuevas.
You're welcome, sir.
So, for this evening's meeting, we just have the one agenda item. I'll sort of tee it up and then maybe turn it over to Councilmember Huffaker, who approached me yesterday. So obviously, there's been some issues going on with respect to residential building and the governor's order that basically only allows it under very specific instances. We have, I think, played by the rules of the governor's office, I think, pretty clearly over the last 3 weeks or so. Steve Smith has worked with Glenn in terms of what we're doing and not doing, and I think currently we're doing exactly what the governor's asked us to do. Obviously, last week sometime, or 2 weeks ago, last week, the Douglas County Commissioners took a more aggressive position than perhaps we were taking in others in our state. And I, at that time, talked with Steve Smith and I talked to the governor's lead counsel. Both told me that they didn't think that the Douglas County's interpretation was correct and that we should continue to do things the way we're doing, which is what I told you last Thursday that we would continue to do. Then this week, the Chelan County Commissioners took an approach probably closer to those in Douglas County in terms of widening the breadth of scope of the kinds of residential construction that can take place. And so I was a bit surprised by that, but they nonetheless did that. So then Councilmember Huffaker contacted me yesterday and said, he really thinks the city needs to take a position on this. So we talked about a couple of different ways of doing it. I really felt it was best that we have this special meeting so we can discuss it openly and in public session, and then we can make a decision one way or another. The city attorney has drafted a resolution for your consideration that would, I think, be more in line with the Douglas County and Chelan County than what we're currently doing. Steve, do you want to comment on that a little bit first, and then maybe we can hear from Glenn, and then maybe hear from Keith Huffaker? So, Steve, you want to go first? Steve Smith?
Sure. Yeah, I guess I'd like to touch on the proclamations and how we got to where we are. So this started in February 29th when the governor proclaimed a state of emergency in the state of Washington. Then on March 23rd, the governor came out and proclaimed the Stay Home, Stay Healthy order, which ordered everybody to stay home unless they were participating in an essential activity. All non-essential businesses were ordered to cease operations. There was an appendix attached to that proclamation that described the various business activities that were essential. Construction activities, it was kind of vague, but it really was only those activities related to essential facilities, services, and projects. Some residential construction activity related to emergency repairs and projects that had to do with structural integrity. Then a couple days later, the governor came out with a memorandum providing some guidance with regard to construction. That memorandum said, and I quote, it says, in general, commercial and residential construction is not authorized under Proclamation 2025 because construction is not considered an essential activity. But then the memorandum went on to spell out some exceptions to that. There were three things they identified. One was construction related to essential activities, which already pretty clearly was allowed. The second one was to further a public purpose or related to a public entity or governmental function. And then the third thing was to prevent spoliation and avoid damage or unsafe conditions and address emergency repairs. Well, that's the guidance we've had officially from the governor's office. As the mayor indicated, he spoke to the governor's general counsel somewhere around April 9th. was told that they felt Douglas County's resolution was not interpreting the governor's order correctly, and what we were doing was correct. I've told Glenn that just recently that I think under the spoliation provision that once construction starts, that it would be reasonable to take the position that spoliation or damage would occur if construction stops, and also that partial construction creates an unsafe condition. I also think it would be unlikely that the governor's office or the health department would question our judgment in that regard. I think that's a local judgment. So the resolution we're proposing here, this 2020-13, it's crafted similarly to Chelan County's. I use that as the base, but I cleaned it up a little bit in my mind so that they started with Douglas County's resolution, and they kind of mixed some concepts. They were using a basis of real estate transactions, and then mixed that in with the spoliation exception. So I've clarified that to remove the real estate transaction part of it and make it pretty clearly that under a situation where a permit's been issued and construction's been started, that if there's spoliation or potential damage or an unsafe condition, that we could allow construction to start. And frankly, I think if any project started, I think it would fit under that category without too much trouble. So that's kind of where we are today. That's the resolution we're proposing. And if you have any questions, I'd be sure.
Any questions for Steve at this point, or should we hear from Glenn next?
What's different?
What's different?
What is different than what we're doing now? We got this.
So what we
10
have
minutes
been
ago.
doing,
Right.
Mark, what we have been doing is there were situations where, let's say, a loan to close or a real estate transaction to close needed a final inspection. And so we determined a couple weeks ago that we would send an inspector out to make that final inspection so that they could get their occupancy permit. And then having the occupancy permit allowed the sale to close or the loan to close. And so part of that real estate transaction process required that. So we felt that was appropriate to do that. But that's as far as we went. So we weren't sending inspectors out or allowing construction, in earlier stages of the project, like, framing, foundations, roofing, that kind of stuff.
Essentially, it has to be after a installation inspection, because everything between an installation inspection and the final is work that they could be doing. So then we checked on the final for the occupancy, which is tied to mortgage or purchase and sale. Then we've also been doing reviewing on a case-by-case spoliation and damage, life safety type things. And the building official and permit center supervisor has been reviewing those and making a determination and call whether there could be a potential life safety issue or damage if something wasn't done. But we haven't been doing it as broad as Mr. Smith noted, as far as soon as construction starts. With that respect, we aren't requiring. Another difference is we are using the date. It had to have had a improved insulation inspection prior to the date certain in order to proceed. That's the sort of our minimum requirement to proceed for those single-family homes for further inspection. We haven't been requiring, though, that they provide the proof of a mortgage or purchase and sale, quite frankly, because almost all of them either have a mortgage involved or a purchase and sale. So we haven't been requiring the additional paperwork that this would provide.
So what does this do differently, other than that? Is this authorizing new construction, authorizing construction to go ahead?
No, it would not. It would, in my interpretation and understanding, is that it would provide the additional process for us to get documents submitted on the verifying the mortgages or the purchase and sale and a form to be on the site. Just sort of lays things all out with an interpretation from Steve Smith. We would follow that as far as essentially as soon as construction has started to prevent spoliation and damage, we could take that interpretation and use that,
Which is new.
which is
That is
new.
new. That's different than what we've been doing, because if it wasn't only going towards the final inspection, we were allowing construction to continue. But if you had framed your house, we stopped you because you hadn't gotten to the point where you were doing the electrical and the plumbing sub work and all that stuff. So we said, you're done. And we did allow a couple folks that were doing stucco on a home, and they were 2 days away from having it fully stuccoed. We said, you can finish your stucco project, but once you're done with stucco, you're done, because you're not going to get all the way to the finish line. You'll need other inspections to make that happen. So we have, I think, stopped and said that's as far as we're going to go, which is what the governor says is what we should be doing. This idea under spoilage or safety issues would basically say if someone's got a foundation poured and they were under contract prior, they can frame it and take it all the way to the finish line.
Or
Well, this
even,
does, this allows construction to resume,
I think,
unfettered, basically.
I would say fairly close to unfettered.
Okay.
I think we should ask a question. I mean, there's questions about.
Can I weigh in here?
Yeah, Keith, go ahead.
I don't think, I think the way Chelan County has drafted theirs and the way Steve has drafted ours, it isn't saying that we're going to allow it to go unfeathered. What it says is that if the Director of Community Development or his designee will determine that if said building is at a stage where spoilage, damage, or unsafe conditions may occur if the construction is discontinued. So what that's saying is our Community Development Director has the authority to look at a situation and say, you know what, if we don't allow this to continue, it could be damaged by the elements. Therefore, you can continue to get it to a stage where it's safe. But I don't think it says you can 100% restart and take it to the finish line. And I don't think Chelan counties or Douglas counties say the same thing. Or excuse me, I believe they're in the same idea of that, just to allow some activities to occur to make sure that job sites are safe and they aren't going to be damaged by the elements if they're left undone.
and I think from,
Steve, is that correct? Is my interpretation of that correct?
That is how it's worded, yeah. I note too that this doesn't allow for any new starts. You know, this is only for things that got started before March 27th.
I think staff would be looking for some direction from the mayor on this, though, as far as, you know, from spoilage and spoliation and damage, life safety, we've been looking at it on a case-by-case basis with the expertise of the building official and analyzing that on whether there could be a potential for damage versus from the perspective of a legal basis on what you could, how far of an envelope you could push it. This started in Richland, really started the idea of pretty much allowing anything that started to continue, and then that's through a variety of building associations has gained ground, say, with Douglas County and Chelan County. We have done a lot of research through the Association of Building Officials and what other folks are doing. There are some that are doing similar to Douglas and Chelan County. I'd say more are along the line of what we're doing or less. So we tried to do some checking.
So in my mind, what we're looking at doing would align pretty closely with Chelan County. And I think it gives certain jobs the ability to continue if there's problems if they don't continue.
Yeah, I think that's accurate, Keith.
I have a question having to do with the March 27th date. Do we know how many, if any, permits were issued prior to that date that have not gone to at least the initial footing and foundation inspection?
I thought you might ask that question. Let's see, we've got 28 issued single-family home permits, and 11 have been halted.
Okay. At what stage?
See, permits that were under construction but stopped, that have not gotten the installation inspection are 7. So under this provision, and if we followed the broader legal interpretation on potential damage, 7 would be allowed to go forward. 4 did not start at all, so they would not be allowed to go forward.
So those would not be allowed to, those are done until...
Correct. The 4 that had not started at all would not be allowed to proceed.
It's kind of hard to say that raw ground is going to spoil. Right.
Now, if they had done, we have allowed for someone who was going to had done excavation and they needed a retaining wall and there was a potential of sliding and damages, and we'd probably, under Steve Smith's interpretation, I would say if someone's gone into that and done that site work, they would probably be allowed to proceed.
So essentially, all of them are going to continue.
The ones that are under construction, that are currently, the ones, if you went up to Pine Shadow and saw them framing and those sorts of things, those would continue, yeah.
So it's kind of, a couple of things I'm sure you guys have worked out, but I'm just curious about. Obviously, we got, actually when you and I were first on the councils, when we got rid of our electrical inspection program and we rely on the state. Do we know if the Labor and Industries is going to care, if we allow this, are they going to be doing the electrical inspections before we're approving covering items?
I do not know.
You see what the problem there is? You need an electrical inspection, a final before we can do a final, and you need electrical inspections before work is covered.
Right.
So if they're not doing that, are we party to encouraging, same with worker safety rules that LNI does, are they going to be out? I mean, these just things that are kind of rattling around in my head as to worker safety,
Right.
homeowner warranties of the electrical inspections passing. I mean, it's just,
Well, that could stop their project. If the electrical guy won't come out, they're dead in the water.
well, we'd think so.
We asked about,
We would think so.
Yeah.
one of the inspectors spoke to LNI about a week and a half ago, and at that time they weren't doing inspections, but whether they'll change that with Chelan County and Douglas County both proceeding, I don't know.
And we still can't.
And again, I think the flavor of this, again, in my interpretation, isn't necessarily to give them the authority to complete the house. It's to get those constructions to a point where they're dried in and safe. You're right. They're if they put electrical in the wall, they can't close up the walls until they get those inspections. But not having sheetrock on the inside isn't going to create an unsafe condition.
That's right, Keith.
Mr. Jammerman, did you want to say something?
Well, I was just curious about the commercial side of this. Is this strictly limited to residential? Because I've been getting calls about subdivisions that are under construction. They're claiming, again, using Glenn's example of the retaining wall, they're claiming, well, we've got grading, this sitting there exposed. We've, at this point...
Glenn asked me that question today, and I think it applies to commercial as well because they have the same issue of spoliation and damage and unsafe condition. The memorandum that talks about it was heavily weighted towards residential, but I think it also covers commercial.
Okay, and that would be, that I say subdivision, so we have residential subdivisions that are putting in road infrastructure, utilities, those types of things.
I'm glad you brought that up, Robin. So under the resolution, it would allow something that we're not doing currently, which is the commercial inspections, except for, those life safety type things or potential damages. So it would allow those to proceed if they had started them under the, as interpreted by legal counsel.
And same with subdivisions then, so you got someone who's starting to grade and do some of that sort of work on a local subdivision. I can just think of one, there may be more. Steve Smith, you would then say they'd be able to continue because the wind might blow the dirt away or something, and so they need to keep working?
Yeah, I mean, there's definite spoliation issues, but there's also, like, we have definite stormwater problems with those projects that need to be, the mud needs to be contained.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think that's the kind of stuff needs to continue to, at least to a point where it's protected.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? And I do apologize for this showing up last minute, but this just sort of happened yesterday, and then we got to get you 24 hours notice to have the discussion. I really felt it was best that we have it in person, so I do apologize for some of the last minute paperwork. That's why this is an emergency meeting, and if you need more time to read it or anything, feel free to do that. Again, I do apologize for the timing, but I really felt it was best that we debated this amongst ourselves.
And
I
again,
think I agree with that, and I do appreciate the mayor and the staff scrambling last minute to try and get this together, but I do believe it's what's best for our city right now.
and yet we're not sure that this, I mean, we talk about ambiguity with the governor's proclamation, and as an adult and in communications, usually when I run into ambiguity, I call the source that created the ambiguity and find out. We haven't done that in this case, right?
No, we have.
Okay.
Well, other than speaking with the governor directly, we spoke with the governor's council last Thursday. The governor's office called me this afternoon as they caught wind that we may be having this meeting today. And they said, made it clear that they don't agree with Chelan County's interpretation and Douglas County's interpretation. That's the same thing they told me a week ago. So I will tell you, the governor's office is convinced that the way we are currently doing it is the right way, and that we are, if we adopted this, that would be against the governor's wishes in terms of what he would like us to be doing. So that has not changed. Now, I have not spoken to the governor directly. It was the governor's legal counsel last week, and then it was Salvador called me this afternoon just to make sure that we were aware of the governor's position on this. So I told him I would reiterate it to the council again tonight. But I also did tell them that we've got the councils in a tough spot because we've got both counties around us doing something different. And quite frankly, you can drive down one street and on the left, it's an unincorporated Chelan County, and someone in the house on the right, they can't. So it does put us in a sort of difficult, you guys in a difficult position. So they understood that, but nonetheless, here we are. So.
Well, this is Ruth. To me, this is about assets that are exposed, and we're not. I don't see how we are going against governor's orders. I mean, this is one of the exceptions that was allowed under the governor's orders, and as long as we're doing it, within the health guidelines of social distancing, I just don't see what the problem is.
Yeah, Frank, I was going to comment on your statement. I actually think our Constitution as drafted would more in line with the governor's proclamations and guidance than
What is that squeaking?
I think as long as we find it, I think we're covered.
Okay. So can we use, I don't know if you guys are on mute or not, but we're getting a lot of feedback on some of those. You can sort of mute before you talk, that would be helpful. And if let's assume we decided not to pass the resolution or not have a motion on it, is there enough of just giving us direction that we could just sort of through a direction to the mayors with direction to staff to start looking at this thing differently and really not adopt anything? Or is it important that we have a formal adoption? Steve Smith?
I think the problem is, I think there's enough guidance out there from the governor's office that we wouldn't need to do our own resolution. However, I think as a practical matter, what people are finding is that without something like this posted on site, the workers are not willing to show up, the subs aren't willing to deliver. They need something in writing to say, yeah, it's okay to drop these trusses off or come and, do whatever I need to do on this job site. So I think there's some importance that we actually do this.
As another option, could we do something in between where we had a template form where we would insert the building permit number and sign it and provide it to the applicant so that they have that, but they wouldn't have to go through the additional steps?
I think, listen, if we adopt this resolution, you're going to be the one that sort of operates within it, and whatever you think is reasonable to do based on what's happening here is what you're going to do. I don't think we're going to micromanage what that looks like, but I sort of agree with Steve. I think either we're in or we're out, and either the answers are you're doing what you're doing currently, and we're taking the definition of spoilage and keeping it very, very minimal, right? Or we're going to allow these other 7 homes to continue to the finish line, and whether or not L&I comes out and inspects them is an issue between the builder and L&I, quite frankly. We're finding ourselves in interesting spots. The Winco folks actually got their building permit, but whether they start construction or not is going to be up to the health department. And whether or not, I believe they're considered an essential business, groceries, so I think they believe that the health department's going to let them start construction. I think that's probably going to happen, but we're not the ones that police that, right? We just issue a permit. That's our job. Here's the permit. Whether you get to start or not is going to be somebody else's sort of responsibility. So this really just gives those 7, and I think some clarity to the commercial stuff.
So,
Yeah, can you make sure you get into the mic in case the folks, that,
excuse me,
that's all right. I
Mike.
don't even know if it's even on. There it is, yeah.
I guess one other thing that kind of concerns me is in that last example, Winsco is an essential business. If it was a store and operating, yeah, it's an essential business. Building another essential business building, it's a commercial building,
Right.
which under current regulations, I would assume is, if I wanted to put in a pet store, that
Yeah.
I wouldn't be allowed to do that. Even though the firehouse downtown is considered an essential business, sort of fueled by pet food. That's one of the things I guess has really kind of concerned me through this whole thing. We've got the fire station under construction down there. They're doing their thing. Guys are welding like mad.
Mhm.
We've got, what was the other one? Our former city hall.
Social Security's going, yep.
Yeah, they're working down there. I'm not, that's an essential business. I mean, they already have an office here. It isn't like they don't have someplace to be.
Right.
And they're waiting for us to get done, that project to get done so they can start their business. I mean, to me, there's a serious disconnect here in terms of what's being done. Building, multifamily homes, I think that'd be just as essential as a building another store.
Yeah.
So, obviously that probably didn't carry a lot of weight with the governor, but I see some real disconnects in that. And if we allow, some of these things to get closed up and whatever, I mean, yeah, you're not going to be able to finish it. As I understand it, that you're not going to go tell.
Not our call whether L&I shows up or not. That's somebody
Yeah,
else's
so I mean, they're not
decision.
going to be
Yeah.
able to go to completion and hand them the key and they
Right.
move in. But if you got a building under construction and you got no roof on it, to me, that's a serious issue. And we're getting to the time of year where we do get quite a bit of rain that we get for the year in these months. So I think we need to have there needs to be some movement here to allow some of these things to get to a point that where they're not going to be damages and a loss, to be encountered there. So, I guess as I read it and as explained tonight, I think I'm okay with this. I just don't think that that there has to be some leeway in there to get some of these kind of things taken care of, just for the sake of we're not opening up the whole system. Everybody's starting from scratch. So I guess I would like to have something like this in place.
So are we interested in getting a motion on the table so we can have further discussion?
Well, yeah, either way, I did have a question about one of the conditions here that it looks like that we are going to assume monitoring social distancing guidelines. Condition number 5 says that all persons must observe it according to the governor's proclamation. So instead of labor and industries, which I believe regulates construction and worker safety, we're going to assume that responsibility since we're making it a condition of people proceeding.
I don't know that we would. I think it's the health district and the contractor's call, and
No,
I,
it wouldn't be the health district, it's labor and industries.
And some of it is actually labor and industries as well. I can tell you that I have a job site in Pasco where labor and industry showed up and threatened to shut them down if they didn't follow the guidelines. But even that has a lot of misinformation about what's required and what's not. So they showed up one day, told them everybody had to have masks, they had to have X amount of wash stations per so many people, and the next day they showed up and said, oh, we were wrong about that, you don't have to wear a mask, you just have to be 6 feet apart and wash your hands on a regular basis. But it was labor and industry that came and set those guidelines for the job site.
I guess Elle and I would be doing that. I don't expect our staff to go out and enforce that.
So if someone makes a motion on this, should we not strike that from our resolution so it's not implied that we're going to assume that responsibility?
Well, I think there's got to be something in the resolution that discusses social distancing and the contractor's responsibility to maintain it, right? Is that just implied?
And it doesn't really say that we're going to enforce it.
Keith,
We don't enforce other rules that the state sets out, as far as, if you're on a roof working, you're supposed to be tied off, and it's not our job to police that, it's labor and industries.
In the
We
context,
give them the building permit, but we're not the one that says you have to wear safety gear.
in the context of the resolution, it points out conditions to receive the approval of the city. These are the things. So we're going to require a signed affidavit. We're going to require a determination by community development at the stage. We are going to require ourselves to issue an authorization letter. We are going to require inspections by arrangement. Number 5, we're requiring that they observe social distancing guidelines. That's my point. These are our conditions.
So you think that implies that we're also going to police that?
Yes.
Yeah, Mark, maybe a better way to say that would be it's just to say it's our expectation that the permittee will follow the governor's protection measures that's laid out in the proclamation. Just something like that. Soften that up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
And I just have a general question for the mayor and for Mr. DeVries, and that is, what are we doing to ensure the safety of our employees that are conducting these inspections?
So Glenn, you want to go first, and then I'll go second?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we make sure that they have protective gear for one, and then 2, there's communication with the people calling for inspections on limiting the people there. We allow the inspector to call off the inspection if they're not comfortable. We allow them to clear floors, clear the building before they do their inspections. But if their instruction is if you're not comfortable, then we'll have them do a reinspection and put more specific terms so that you feel safe on the site.
I think we're doing the best we can with respect to those that, if they don't feel like it's comfortable, they don't have to go do it. And we have 3 inspectors total?
We have some backup, but we have 2 inspectors right now.
Including backup, we have
2.
2, okay.
Well, we have, and then
2
we
and a
have
half?
3 others that can do inspections.
Okay. So if people are comfortable, we have some backup plans for others. That I would assume we'd be able to get most things inspected with people that are comfortable doing inspections.
Absolutely, yes.
All right, I'd entertain a motion if we had one. And if we want to do something what Mark says, I would just make a note that, to make adjustments to number 5, to soften that language regarding whose responsibility is to enforce that.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion allowing certain,
You want a motion to adopt resolution 2020-13?
yes,
Yes.
got it. Your Honor, I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2020-13, a resolution allowing certain pre-existing homes, sales, financing agreements, and residential commercial construction contracts to proceed during the term of the governor's stay-at-home, stay healthy proclamation. You want to make a statement about
With changes to number 5,
changes to number 5?
as requested by Councilmember Kulas.
Okay, with changes. Number 5, in regards to Mr. Kuloff.
So we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
I will second it.
We have a motion by Councilmember Hornby, a second by Councilmember Harold, to adopt resolution number 2020-13, a resolution allowing certain pre-existing home sales, financing agreements, and residential commercial construction contracts to proceed during the term of the governor's stay-at-home, stay healthy proclamation, with changes to number 5 on page 2, where Steve Smith will soften that language, where we'll be encouraging everyone to apply social distancing guidelines consistent with Governor Inslee's proclamation 20-25. Discussion. I know we've sort of beat this up a little bit. Anyone wish to have any words before we vote?
Just one thing. So I'm clear this does cover commercial as well.
Yes.
And it sounds like you can start and complete a subdivision in its entirety. The
Yes.
infrastructure improvements, whether you've started excavation or not, you can install utilities and build roads and.
Yep.
That's, well, we don't have any that I know that were stopped, that we have several, or that were ready to be issued and didn't move forward, but we have several that were under construction, I think, that would take advantage of this to start back up.
Yeah, so they could finish the subdivision, but no one could start a house, right? Just,
What's the difference?
yeah, okay.
I remain concerned that this may or may not fit within the governor's proclamation. I may still vote for it, but I would hope that if the governor's office does formally tell us that we're wet, that we stop doing this.
I will communicate with you whatever I hear from the governor's office, either in form of an email or a phone call. You'll hear from me.
This week,
Yeah.
is I'm not going to substitute my judgment for the experts that the governor has at his disposal on the health issue.
I'll make one quick statement. So this is new territory for all of us. We're doing our best to stumble through this the best we can without making too many mistakes along the way. This is a health issue, and I agree wholeheartedly with Mark Kulas about the health issue. And if the governor says we stepped out of line, that we reassess this.
All right, any other discussion?
Well, Travis, I'll throw in my 2 cents on that, that if this is all a health issue, then all projects should have been shut down, because whether it's essential or not, the fire station could wait a few more months. The Social Security office could wait a little bit longer. So I don't think this is quite as big of a health issue as people are saying, especially when a lot of construction sites had only families working there already. So I don't want to step on the governor's toes either, but it looks to me like Douglas County has found a way to be comfortable with it. Chelan County has now found a way to be comfortable with it. I think what we're doing is in alignment with those 2 counties, and if we're told otherwise, we can reconsider.
And I will concur with what Steve just said.
I have to concur with Keith also. I think, I find it very discouraging to see that they're continuing work on government buildings and the rest of the economy is basically shut down. I think this is one place where we can make an exception, and it shouldn't cause any damage. It should only help.
All right. Anybody else wish to say something before we vote? Seeing and hearing no others, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Hi.
All those opposed? Motion carries, 7 in favor, 0 against. I don't have anything else for the good of the order, so we are adjourned.